Hey there, Kyle here, and today we've got some news to talk about because apparently Gibson has tried to shut down Jericho guitars. Let's do it. All right, hope you guys are doing great out there today, and I gotta say, it's an interesting time to be a Gibson guitar fan, and I'm gonna let you guys in on that with me right off the bat. I love Gibson guitars, I really do. I know it's the popular opinion to hate Gibson these days, and rightfully so. They have given all the reasons in the world to dislike their brand, and I absolutely understand that. But please keep in mind, I'm gonna make this video as objective as possible. We're gonna try to examine what little facts are out there. This is still an alleged story because only one side of the story is currently available to the public, so we're going to base our thoughts and our statements around what is currently available to us. So let's jump into it, shall we? Now, if you guys are not familiar with Jericho guitars is a small brand. They basically design a bunch of guitars and then they have them imported. It's kind of similar to the Gallagher model as far as I'm aware, where everything's designed here in the United States. They export the manufacturer over to Korea, I believe, I could be wrong, and then they are imported back into the US for sale. They sell direct. I'm not sure if they have any dealers, but I know that what I've seen from them, you basically buy it directly from their website. And I gotta say, I have actually had my eye on Jericho guitars for years because I'm mostly a metal-oriented guitarist, and what Jericho's designs are is they're basically kind of updated takes on classic designs. Basically what a lot of modern companies do, like Schecter and ESP Ltd. And honestly, I think a lot of their designs look really, really good. There have been a few that I have almost pulled the trigger on over the years. So I have been familiar with their brand for some time, but I've never interacted with them in any way. I have never purchased any of their guitars in any way, you know, like with money, I guess. I don't know why I said it like that. But yeah, they're a smaller company, and I am always about supporting smaller companies. I am definitely down with the underdogs. I mean, it's part of my punk rock and hardcore roots. But again, I'm gonna try to keep everything here as objective as possible in my thoughts to you guys, and then I'm gonna leave it open to you down in the comments to comment on how you feel about these things. So a couple days ago, Jericho Guitars made a statement on their Facebook page, and I'm going to read that statement to you and we're going to discuss it. So here we go. Without establishing any contact whatsoever, Gibson's team of lawyers shut down my brand Jericho Guitars website and attempted to stop me from hosting baritoneguitars.com and jerichoguitars.com. They shut down my personal and business email. They shut off Jericho Guitars' web hosting service. They forced me to remove every single one of my product listings offline before ever speaking a word or delivering me any letters of any kind. My business has been, for this past week, completely unable to accept orders, and after having switching hosting accounts, all our sales history is totally inaccessible to me. Days later, I found out it was Gibson Guitars. This is a company I once looked up to who's actually responsible for deleting the schedule to my kids' gymnastics games over a shape, and then had the nerve to 1 week later demand I give them receipts for my sales as if they can just harass and intimidate other brands into taking what they want. I own baritoneguitars.com, I own baritone-guitars.com, and the brand Jericho Guitars. I will not be scared into handing over my property. I had to hear from my customers and a lawyer in some cubicle at a hosting company that my account for domestictonewood.com and modernbaritone.com were suspended over an allegation without instruction or explanation. This is a developing situation. Dave Musselman, CEO and president of Jericho Guitars. So there is a little bit to unpack from that statement, guys. So kind of going to the top of the statement. Jericho says that Gibson has shut down multiple sites owned by Jericho Guitars and have also basically like put a stop to their sales. Now, that's huge for a small company to have your sales basically shut off for a week. You know, I don't know what type of business that Jericho does as far as sales volume or anything, but that's got to be a massive blow to their overall bottom line. Being shut down for a week, some companies might not even be able to handle that type of shutdown, not taking any sales for that long. So that is a really, really big deal. That's It's scary. It's scary for sure to know that if it was Gibson Guitars behind this, and we're going to kind of try to elaborate on that a little bit more, but if Gibson really did that and shut their sales down for a week on all of their guitars, that's insane, because they have plenty of shapes that don't resemble Gibson shapes whatsoever. So, you know, even if one or two of their shapes do resemble Gibson guitars, basically shutting down the entire brand over one or two shapes, I don't know, man. That's seems a little over the top. Not a good look for Gibson, who already is struggling with optics in the public guitar community. And yeah, overall, I don't think they're going to win any new fans with a move like this. But, big but, I find it really hard to believe that Gibson would completely shut down Jericho Guitars without any prior contact, letting them know, like a cease and desist. Gibson is famous for issuing cease and desists all over the place. It's kind of like Oprah just handing them out. You get a cease and desist. You get a cease and desist. They are not shy about handing those letters out in order to threaten and intimidate builders when they feel like they have a case against them. Taking Gibson public, or, you know, IP is the word that I'm looking for, intellectual property, intellectual property. It's been happening for years and years. It happened in the 70s, it happened in the 80s, it's happened with PRS, it recently happened with Dean Guitars. Not just the cease and desist, but actual lawsuits going to court. So to think that Gibson would come after Jericho, yeah, not surprising, but for them to literally completely remove their website, it almost seems like they have basically removed Jericho Guitars from the internet, other than their Facebook and whatever social media accounts they have. I find that hard to believe. I find it hard to believe that they would do this without prior reaching out. I mean, there is a legal process to all of this. I am not in tune with that legal process, but I know that you kind of have to at least inform the person that you are shutting down that you intend to do so prior to doing it. And my guess is that Jericho either got the emails and just ignored them, got letters and ignored them, got some sort of communication and just kind of brushed it aside, or they, for whatever reason, missed it. They didn't see it. They didn't get the notification again. Find that kind of hard to believe, but yeah, I mean, the very first part of the story, it makes it a little bit hard to believe, just because we know that Gibson has no problem informing people, and they don't care if it goes public when they issue cease and desist over their intellectual property. Wow, I really cannot say that word. So Dave goes on later in that statement to say, days later, I found out it was Gibson Guitars. You know, no proof in this post. If there has been proof posted, I would be curious if you guys could point me to it down in the description or down in the comments of this video after you watch it. But I've watched a few videos on this already. I have read through the comments on the Facebook thread, and I didn't see anything as far as proof. I don't know if there's a reason that Dave from Jericho would not provide this proof, but you know, if you're going to go public with a story like this, in my opinion, you kind of want to have your ducks in a row. You want to be organized, and you want to be able to provide whatever it is in order to prove your case. That way it doesn't come off as allegations without proof, which is, you know, essentially what this is at this point. Further down in the message, he says, "This is a company I once looked up to, who's actually responsible for deleting the schedule of my kids' gymnastic game over a shape, and then had the nerve to 1 week later demand I give them receipts for my sales." So it sounds like, you know, Jericho has already had a run-in with Gibson. So there has probably been prior contact in the past. Again, I'm not sure about the history of all this, so this could be recent. Maybe he's talking about this was something that recently happened. Maybe this was something that happened a couple of years ago. Not 100% sure, but it sounds like Jericho and Gibson are not strangers to each other, and they've already had, you know, some not so nice run-ins with each other. So yeah, guys, that is pretty much the gist of the Jericho Guitars statement. And yeah, it may seem like I'm trying to shoot down everything that's being said here, but I'm not. I'm really not. There's no proof to what's being said, at least none that I have seen as of yet, and I'm not going to take the side of a company just with their word. I mean, how many times has that worked out badly in other situations where you take somebody at their word and it comes out that they were not being 100% truthful? Now, I'm not saying that that's what's happening here with Jericho guitars, but we don't have the proof yet. I want to believe Jericho guitars. I 100% want to believe Jericho guitars, and that's as a Gibson. And that is as a Gibson guitar fan. Now, again, I'm a fan of Gibson's guitars. I'm not a fan of Gibson and how they choose to run their company, because I think, as we all know, under Henry, Gibson was an absolute mess. Luckily, in the 80s, he brought it back from the brink of extinction, but pretty much since that time, Gibson has just been making poor choice after poor choice. They were really struggling with a terrible public image. And then in 2019, they did all the restructuring after the bankruptcy and everything, and it seemed like they were going to kind of make a real effort to come back around and maybe be a guitar brand for guitarists and not a guitar brand for businessmen and lawyers. So I had a lot of high hopes when that happened. And then the whole Play Authentic debacle came about. So yeah, I mean, I totally get why people hate Gibson. I get it. I won't argue with it whatsoever. What I do hate is the hive mind mentality that seems to plague the guitar community, especially online. I mean, it just seems to be the cool thing to hate Gibson regardless of what's going on with the company. I see so many comments about people saying that Gibson guitars are junk, they're overpriced, their quality control is absolutely terrible. This has not been my experience with Gibson personally. I have only ever bought one new Gibson guitar, and I still own it. It's a 2016 traditional, and I remember at the time that, you know, people were saying 2016s were some of the worst years in Gibson quality control that they've ever seen. When I bought that guitar, guys, I played a ton of different Gibson guitars at multiple different stores, and almost every single one of them was an incredible guitar, and it was a really hard decision for me to make, to choose which guitar that I wanted. So I ended up buying two of them. I ended up buying a brand new one, and then I ended up buying a used one a couple months later, and I still have both of them. I've bought and sold probably 60, 70, 80 newer Gibson guitars since then. The quality on most of the newer ones, in my personal experience, has been fantastic, and I really think that a lot of the QC stuff just comes from people parroting what they hear online. It comes from groupthink, and I hate that. I think it's dumb, and in my personal words are hard. In my personal experience, Gibson guitars have just been of excellent quality in recent years. Again, that's just my experience. If your experience varies, let me know down in the comments. I'm sure I'm going to hear that. But yeah, previous ownership history and recent public blunders, it's no surprise to me why people hate Gibson guitars. But here's where I will defend Gibson in this issue, or in this case a little bit. Jericho has two guitars that are almost straight up copies of Gibson Les Paul guitars. They did a run of Silverburst Les Paul Customs, one that I almost bought because I thought they looked incredible, that look just about identical to the Gibson Les Paul guitar. And as far as I know, in the United States, the only companies that can make the legit Les Paul body shape with the four knobs, basically the way that Gibson makes them, are Epiphone, because Epiphone is owned by Gibson, and Heritage. I'm not sure how the Heritage thing works, because I know Heritage was the old Gibson factory, old Gibson employees. I don't know if they worked out a deal. The Heritage pickguard and headstock are completely different, but the body shape and the four knob layout is extremely similar. So those are the only two companies that I know that can do it and get away with it and sell those guitars here in the United States. Many other guitar brands have tried, and they have either completely redone their guitars or they have modified them just enough for Gibson to not be able to take them to court. Brands that come to mind there are ESP, Agile guitars, which I own a couple of. And then we move over to Jericho's Explorer shape, another guitar I almost bought for myself. They have an extended scale baritone Explorer style guitar that the headstock is almost identical. The body shape pretty much is an Explorer, so not a surprise. Not a surprise that Gibson would try to come after Jericho for, almost direct copies of their guitars. That's intellectual property in a nutshell. Like, you can't directly copy that stuff if it's patented, if it's protected under law, if you went through, the right avenues to do that. Of course, we know that like Fender didn't. So that's why you see so many Telecaster and Strat copies that are pretty much exactly the same as Fenders. But yeah, I just, like if it's true, if Gibson shut down their entire site over these two shapes, I don't know the legal info behind that. I don't know if they can shut down the entire brand, even though most of the shapes that Jericho make are not close copies of Gibson shapes. I don't know. I don't know the info behind that. All I know is that I really don't find this surprising, and I know that people are going to hate on Gibson big time over this particular situation. I'm going to wait until all the information comes out, until we learn everything. I think Gibson totally has a case on the two shapes that I mentioned. I don't know how it works, shutting down an entire company's site and basically every site that they own. I don't know. That seems messed up to me, but, I have no background in law of any sort. So you guys let me know down in the comments. What do you think about this situation? I think it's bad for everybody. It doesn't look good for Gibson. They do have a case on those two shapes, in my opinion. But I hate to see small companies also basically being bullied into either changing what they're doing or being bullied out of existence. Jericho, you probably shouldn't have directly copied those two shapes, but otherwise, I'm still rooting for you. I want to see your company move forward, just, obviously with a couple of changed up designs to play it safe in the future, because I do think that Jericho has some awesome looking guitars and I've heard really good things about them. So I hope that this goes down smoothly. I hope that there is resolution that works out in Jericho's favor, basically pending them changing the two shapes that are very close to Gibson copies. But yeah, I would like to know what you guys have to say about this issue, as I'm sure there will be many comments on either side of the argument here. But yeah, leave it down in the comment section. Let me know what you think about this whole situation. And if this is your first time here, welcome. Normally I review guitar stuff, but I felt like this was interesting enough to talk about. So go ahead, leave those comments down below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And yeah, look forward to seeing what you guys have to say. Kyle here again. We'll see you next time. You know what this wall is missing? Another amp. There we go.